When the Puritans landed at Cape Cod Bay in 1620, they declared that their new colony was founded for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith, and to honor their king and country. Between 1650 and 1660, another religious sect arrived in the New World. These were known as the Quakers, or as they called themselves, Friends. Although both groups were Christians, they strongly believed the translation of how God should be worshipped and the Bible interpreted was the one true way, and that all others were wrong. Of the two, customary history portrays the Puritans as one of the least tolerant of religious groups in pre-Revolutionary War America. If a colonist did not adhere to Puritan religious laws, there was a good chance they would be banished from the colony, and in the 17th century, that most likely meant banishment to the wilderness. Anne Hutchinson was one of the most well-known examples of this punishment when she was banished in 1637 for defaming the clergy. To us, banishment seems a little harsh, and as expected, approaches to crime and punishment has changed over the past 400 years. But in the 1600s, was banishment really that bad or out of the ordinary? Punishment for other crimes included whipping, mutilation, and death. These were all fairly common punishments for breaking one of the most serious of offenses, that of violating church law. Anne Hutchinson was not the only threat to peaceful law and order to Massachusetts Bay colonies. Other threats soon arrived from Europe and the other colonies. One of the most severe threats came from the Quakers. The Quakers' calling demanded they reach out and preach their particular way of worship, that the Spirit of God dwelled within them and guided their actions, and it was their mission from God to reform the woefully misguided English in the New World. The leaders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony saw the Quakers as a sincere threat to their true Church of Christ, by wild sectaries deluded by the devil. To the Puritans, the Quakers were nothing less than a satanic plot sent to undermine their godly efforts in an inhospitable American wilderness, and the colony had to be protected. Between 1659 and 1661, 4 Quakers were executed for violating the Massachusetts Bay Colony's banishment law. This law, adopted from the Elizabethan law against the Jesuits, stated if you were banished from the colony and returned, you could be hanged. 4 Quakers violated the law, and they were hanged. Over the next 100 years, the Quakers and the Puritans conducted a propaganda war in newspapers, journals, in front of the crown and from the pulpit on who was right and who was wrong, in carrying out the executions, with the stories and reasons changing to match the shifting attitudes towards religion and punishment. In the end, the general consensus was that the Quakers won the war by staying on the offensive and controlling the message that the 4 died as martyrs, and the Puritans lost because they were unable to shed the perception by the other colonies that they were intolerant, bigoted religious extremists. The Puritans found that executing men and women because of their religious beliefs was impossible to defend. Although the 4 were banished and told not to return under punishment of death, they did return and were executed. From that point on, the propaganda war began. Initially, both sides used religion and faith as their defense. Puritans trying to protect God and the church, and Quakers as trying to convert heretics to the true way of worship. But this quickly changed. Unfortunately for the Puritans, they were already seen by the other colonies as being intolerant. Although, as you know from our readings, many other colonies' intolerances rivaled that of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And of course, the Salem witch trials did not help their case. Let's talk about the propaganda war that followed. The Quakers were able to use this as a pivotal event to further their cause, of which I already mentioned as being to reform the woefully misguided English, and went on the attack. From my readings, it seems that the Puritans saw this as an event that had to happen. It was legal, and most importantly, protected their religious way of life, and as Cotton Mather's later wrote, their sanctuary from religious repression that they had carved out of the hostile wilderness. Of course, particular interest from a propaganda perspective is how both parties changed their story to match changing attitudes towards religion, punishment, and how others perceive their causes. Right from the beginning, the Quakers attacked the Puritans in the Massachusetts Bay Colony as the most vainest and bestialist place, its inhabitants all brutes, profane, and corrupt. The Puritans believed they were just enforcing the laws designated by the people in the church. They further believed their actions were justified because all of the executed were warned to stay away, but decided to impale themselves on the tip of a spear. Therefore, it was not their fault. It was the Quakers' desire to become martyrs, so they got what they wanted. The Quakers, on the other hand, immediately began to portray the four as martyrs, but included the prophecy that Puritans in New England would suffer the wrath of God for the unjustified and evil executions of innocent, peaceful Quakers. In a period of minimal medical knowledge, Indian wars, and crop failures, the prophecy seemed to be quickly carried out. An interesting pattern I found was that if a writer was sympathetic to the Quaker cause and writing for an English audience, as Edward Burrough did, the prophecy part was left out. But if he was writing for a colonial audience, he kept it in. I guess an English reader was not so certain that God's wrath was so easily laid upon English subjects, but a colonial living in the harsh New World needed justification for the bad that happened. In their case, fire and brimstone was a real and constant fear. The Quakers' attacks against the Puritans took a shift during the Restoration period and depended less on the prophecy theme and more on the martyrdom theme. This better adhered to the Quakers' image of a non-confrontational, peace-loving, God-fearing people, and this transformation was pretty much complete by the end of the 17th century. The Puritans continued to argue their case, but changed from the combination religious-legal argument to just a legal argument. But until the United States lost interest in the whole controversy, they could not shake the perception that they were intolerant bigots. Even the great Cotton Mathers could not sway attitudes. You could say that the Puritans lost the first great propaganda war. Even Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote a story about the executions. It was not until the great story of the Indians and the peaceful Pilgrims sitting down for a wonderful Thanksgiving dinner became common American folklore that the Puritans finally found their place in the heart of America. The Quakers, on the other hand, still seem to be known as an innocent, quiet, peace-loving, non-confrontational religious group that would not bother a fly. I think there's a little bit of truth and untruth with both perceptions. My opinion, putting myself in the place of the Puritans, I can see their point of view for the banishment, maybe not the execution, but they were following their law that was, in their eyes, sanctioned by God and King. The Quakers had been warned once, in the case of Mary Dyer twice, were confrontational, and came to the Massachusetts Bay Colony with the intent of disrupting their way of life. These facts, plus the fact that it was a period of serious religious, political, economic, and military turmoil throughout the colonies and Europe, compounded the problem. Not being a religious extremist, I cannot side with the Quakers. They should have stayed home. Thank you very much.